Everybody, it's your host Dan here, coming at you with another Monday episode. And this episode, we're gonna look at "School is Hell," cartoon book by Matt Groening. Cover says it all. Uh, and you're probably thinking, well, for those who don't know, Matt Groening is the guy who created The Simpsons. But before he created The Simpsons, and actually during creating The Simpsons for quite a while, he had a weekly comic strip called Life in Hell. Um, there's never been like a complete collected works. I would love to see like a box set like they did for Calvin and Hobbes and the Far Side. And this book came to me at a very young age. I found this when I was like 8, and I think I talked about this a little bit. Yeah, I think I talked about this on a nominee when we did the Simpsons episode, but we're going to flip through the actual book now. And front cover, this I believe is before the Bart Simpson chalkboard gags that were in that continue to be in every Simpsons intro. And I think Groening gets to be a little bit more kind of paranoid in Life in Hell versus like The Simpsons. The Simpsons has a pretty bleak outlook on kind of the state of humanity, but I think this is bleaker. And it's not that the worldview of the Simpsons, like I think part of the one of the big strengths of the worldview of the Simpsons is that it is coming from a lot of different writers, and it does have that richness, but like the opposite can also be a strength. And I think that that's the big strength of Life in Hell when it's firing on all cylinders. Um, I'm not sure which Life in Hell book I would say is my favorite. I definitely I'm not as into the Akbar and Jeff collections as the other ones, but to each their own. But this is the one I saw first. This is the one I kind of I'm partial to. We have a second splash panel. He writes the name of the book, "School is Hell," and he runs out of the classroom. So there's a lot of things that Groening is really good at, and he has his kind of combination of skills and limitations is very different from most other cartoonists. Like his grasp on the technical elements of drawing is he doesn't have a lot of range. Like he can draw a simple corner perspective in a chalkboard. He can draw something that kind of looks like a foot, but he's not Mobius. He knows it. We know it. And so he has to lean on some of the other skills in the cartooning toolbox. And number one, incredibly distinctive lettering. Like, they kept this for The Simpsons. What other cartoon that was ever made used the creator's handwriting as the basis for their logo? Right? Like, Family Guy doesn't look like, Seth MacFarlane wrote a note to somebody or whatever. Very distinctive, very easy to read, but it has this charming kind of amateurishness to it that I think pairs well with the limitations in the artwork. There we go, it's centered now. So let's keep going. So this came out in 1987. So this would have been, I think Tracy Ullman might have started airing the Simpsons shorts by then. And this isn't the first Life in Hell book. Life in Hell, I believe, started in like 1980, and it was in one Los Angeles news weekly. There aren't a lot of news weeklies anymore, but for younger Zoomers, I guess, like a news weekly, it was a big tabloid sized newsprint publication. Most regions of the country would have one. They'd have like an events listing set of pages, personals ads, usually some kind of like interview with a local musician or a story about stuff going on in the city. The Village Voice was one of those. Metroland was the local one. And so that's where these strips ran. Um, and they're just really good. He does so much with so little. And I think he tries to compensate a little bit for the drawings not really, he can't let the drawings do too much of the heavy lifting. The drawings are here to communicate what's going on and to sell a specific tone. Um, Very rarely are there backgrounds like, here's a background, here's a line, right? And the strength is in the writing. This is like kind of 3 or 4 daily strips worth of panels just crammed into a page, and they kind of all have a theme. And he just has a very bleak view of the education system. And it rubbed off on me at a young age. I was on a road trip, and for some reason my dad bought this, and I probably read this like 10 or 12 times on that road trip because it was the only book I had. And yeah, the kind of Matt Groening nihilism, it's just everywhere. It's very amusing. School is teachers who don't know teaching facts that aren't true to kids who don't care, and questions, and then they're just all asleep. Um, I think even though the '90s are kind of being remembered as this big golden age now, because I mean, relative to circumstances now, that the '90s were pretty nice. It still was part of kind of the decline of America after the post-war boom. Like it still is, the '90s were still a little bit under the specter of the '70s, and a lot of Gen X stuff, a lot of late '80s, early '90s stuff reflects that. Like Peter Bag's Hate, Beavis and Butthead, this, The Simpsons. You have kind of there's parts of how they depict America that where it's kind of there's good things about living in America, but a lot of the humor comes from pointing out just sort of the failure of institutions, right? There's all those jokes on The Simpsons about how the the cafeteria serves milk with vitamin R instead of milk, and the buildings all look kind of uh, well, the buildings don't look super run down in The Simpsons, and I mean, I don't think he draws a building in Life in Hell, or he doesn't do it very often. But anyway, I better get moving if I'm ever going to finish this video. So, he kind of does this series where it's like lesson 1, lesson 2. He does this in some of the other Life in Hell books too. Work is Hell, Love is Hell. And starts out with a thesis statement. This one is School Hell. Moves on to kind of the earliest stage of development, nursery school. And it sort of it oscillates between this tone of kind of bitter nihilism and kind of the silly humor of a kid in nursery school. I think Groening had a son by the time that this strip would have been written, maybe? Or maybe he just remembers that far back, but it's very convincing. And, it's, and especially getting your hands on this at 8 years old. This is just kind of a blueprint how to make trouble. Like, a lot of like half these strips on this page, paint on the table, see what paint tastes like, paint on the other kids, spend the rest of your life futilely trying to recapture this spontaneity. Um, try rocking back and forth, rolling your head around, sucking your thumb, or clutching at your genitals. It drives adults crazy. And yeah, and he's playing around with the lettering, like each of these little title boxes. Uh, he'll change the lettering a little bit. And I think it's important that he has distinctive lettering, and I think that's what makes these strips, because like the worldview of it isn't necessarily like, it's not as specifically politically focused, but it's not that far off from like a Tom Tomorrow, This Modern World kind of strip. But Tom Tomorrow, he uses like kind of, I'm trying to, it's like very generic lettering, and it just doesn't feel like I don't go back to This Modern World very often, but I go back to these books quite a lot. Um, and it's so dense. Like it's only I think there's only 48 pages in here, and it was like $9 in the middle of the 90s when I found it. Uh, but it's dense. Like you get your money's worth. These are some of if there's like a spectrum of kind of text to images and comics, and like one side of it you got like an Al Columbia, or you got like a lot of manga. This is the complete other side of that. This is so text driven. Um, and he repeats figures a lot because it's just kind of like Jules Pfeiffer. He doesn't vary the figure as much as Jules Pfeiffer when he does this, but he does make sure the head's moving, and the kind of inherent wobbliness of the drawing carries a little bit of that, so it doesn't get too like stiff. Does the same thing again in this next strip. You have this transformation of this sad child bunny into something that looks suspiciously like Matt Groening. Um, and just going through school, and it's just all teachers telling him stuff. Sometimes I like to imagine that like the Charlie Brown like wah 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 teacher noise, like this is what she's actually saying. Thank you for writing. I must remember to be cheerful and obedient 500 times. Now watch while I slowly rip it up before your eyes. Draw a small circle on the blackboard. Now stick your nose on it while the rest of the class goes out for recess. Perhaps this flunking grade will steer you in the right direction. It's kind of complaining humor, but he's really good at it. And I remember when I was a kid, these were my favorites. The like typologies of people. I guess this was like my astrology, where these Matt Groening cartoons where he lays out like here's the 9 types of grade school teachers. It's all of them: the good mom, Miss Sunshine, the big pal, and he does manage to, like, some of these faces will repeat again. He's kind of got like a cast of characters, but he'll pull something out of his hat every once in a while. Like this doesn't really look like other Matt Groening drawings that I've ever seen, but I mean it does identifiably, looks like a Matt Groening drawing. Um, I think they used that design in a really early Simpsons episode, but don't quote me on that. That just looks really familiar. here's kind of the condensed version of this where it's just the little drawings, and he comes up with a distinct drawing for 6 times 5 comes up with 30 of these, so that's a week's work. And it's kind of fun because it's almost like the intro to Hollywood Squares or the Brady Bunch or something, right? Like when I look at this page, the layout of it says to me, like, don't read this in order like a normal comic, right? Like your eye doesn't want to go boom, 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 boom. Like my eye kind of goes boom, boom, boom on that page. Sort of an interesting effect. Not a lot of other cartoonists do that kind of thing. Here's getting in trouble, and I'd love to see like a large format reprint of this book too, where the pages were like maybe that big. I don't know, somebody's got to own the rights. Like, I'll pay money for that. Who published this? Let's see. Pantheon. Okay, yeah, Pantheon's still in business, I'm pretty sure. Put out a deluxe hardcover. Take my money. I think on a road trip, especially, this book really has its appeals because it has like checklists. It's almost like when I think the other book that I had in the back of the car, it was one of those invisible ink puzzle books that you would get at like a rest stop. I think this was at a rest stop or something. Like, I'm not 100% sure why. I think it was in Maine. I just remember I found this book under circumstances that, if I had to guess, like, how would I find this book, or those aren't the circumstances. Um, this little character, he has these little characters that he doesn't name, but this is like your female narrator. I like how the hands are just kind of out like this all the time. Like, people don't do that, but it's appealing, it's cartoony, and it it makes the figures look a little bit more. They got to look a little kind of chibi or childish or naive, excuse me, or else the kind of nonstop negativity of Groening's writing would start to seem a little bit overbearing. 1 second, I'm gonna go get a drink.